The stories of Oak Ridge during the Manhattan Project are fascinating. Hearing how people were recruited to come here and what it was like living in a secret city. But we rarely hear about what it was like to be a child living behind the fence. My good friend Pat Smith has given a description of the city from a child's point of view. The word she uses to describe her childhood in Oak Ridge is freedom. Patricia Ellen Morgan moved to Oak Ridge at the age of 6 in 1944. She came with her mother, Fanny Bell Lohman Morgan, after her father, Otis Glenn Morgan, a worker in the secret city, was able to find a home for all of them to live together. In the summer of 1943, Otis Glenn Morgan was an employee for Ford, Bacon, and Davis Engineering, living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and working with the Tennessee Valley Authority in construction and maintenance of power plants. He was called up for the draft to join the U.S. Army in World War II. He was 30 years old, healthy, strong, and the father of only one child, a perfect candidate for the draft. But when the Army learned of his employment with Ford, Bacon, and Davis, they told him they didn't want to draft him. But a couple of weeks later, Otis heard from the Army again to learn that he was needed as an employee of Ford, Bacon, and Davis at a secret site to do work no one could know about, all for the good of the war effort. Pat describes her father's response as,
So the Army called him back again. And he said, well, would you two please work it out where I am supposed to be? Either one will be fine. But Ford, Bacon, Davis won out. So Daddy did not go to the Army.
Otis arrived in the secret city January of 1944. Otis's wife, Fanny Bell Lohman Morgan, had no idea where her husband was going or what type of work he was doing. She and her daughter, Patricia Ellen Morgan, my friend Pat Smith, remained in Chattanooga, receiving occasional visits from Otis. They moved to Oak Ridge in June of 1944 after appropriate housing was found for the family. When Pat and her mother visited to view the housing chosen for them, Pat describes her mother's reaction.
So he came home one weekend and he said, I have a house for us, but I don't think you're going to like it. And Mother's remark, I remember her saying, I don't care what I have to live in as long as I can get this family together. Well, he brought us here. And it was a TDU.
Can you describe what that's like?
It's a two-family house.
Okay.
One family in one end and one family in another end. But they're separate units. So anyway, he put Mother and I on the bus to go back to Chattanooga that Sunday evening. I don't think he ever knew it, but my mother cried all the way back to Chattanooga for this awful place that he was taking us to. I did not know what my dad did, and I still do not know what my dad did. I remember several times he came home and would say to my mother, well, they took somebody off of the bus today. And I had heard that several times, and that, I did not understand what that was all about. And so I said to Daddy, why did they take him off of the bus? And Daddy said he talked too much.
Ooh.
So Daddy didn't talk at all.
In the process of doing research for this project, Pat and her family finally learned what Otis Glenn Morgan did as a part of the Manhattan Project. This is what we have learned. By January of 1944, when Otis Morgan arrived, the gaseous diffusion plant K-25 was complete. Thousands converged on the farmland turned factory in East Tennessee. People were recruited from all over the country and came to work at a job unknown in a place unknown, truly a secret. But no matter what led them to the project, they united in one purpose: to help end the war. The urgency of the mission resulted in around-the-clock shifts, 7 days a week. One K-25 worker reflected, "The community was like Las Vegas. It never went to bed." So you can imagine the need for reliable electricity. Otis Morgan's experience with the TVA power plants as an employee of Ford, Bacon, and Davis Engineering made him a perfect candidate to ensure K-25 was always running efficiently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The plants had to have power at all times in order to help end the war. Otis worked at K-25, then X-10, and eventually retired from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So 6-year-old Patricia found herself living in a secret city in 1944. She says she was a child and took everything as a child, oblivious to life around her, except certain aspects. She remembers that instead of sidewalks, there were boardwalks due to the mud and dirt. In the summertime, her father would spray water from a hose on the dirt road in front of their house to keep the dust from flying. She remembers housing being constructed while she was at school, like an entire block going up in one day. As an only child, she remembers how wonderful it was having friends to play with all the time. She was free to go wherever she wanted. She could ride her bike wherever she wanted, walk wherever she wanted, run wherever she wanted. She remembers coming through the gate and the importance of having a pass.
They had to have a pass. And my aunt, who lived in Chattanooga, my Aunt Odie, came home with us one time, but we knew she was going to come home with us, so Daddy had a pass for her at the gate. So that was no problem. She came right on in and everything was fine. And then her husband, my Uncle Liesel, was supposed to come the next weekend. And Daddy had talked to him, and he said, well, he believed he'd come up early Saturday morning. Daddy said, okay, I will have a pass for you at the gate Saturday. Now, don't come Friday. Come Saturday. Well, my uncle didn't listen to my dad. And after work Friday, he decided he would just come on up. And wee hours of the morning, a guard came to our house and woke everybody up, including me. My uncle was at the gate. He had been detained at the gate for hours.
Oh, wow.
And so finally, a guard was available to come get my daddy and take him down. And I don't know what they did, but they got, I guess by then it was Saturday morning. So they got in. I don't know, but I will assure you that my dad was not at all happy with my uncle.
Pat remembers the only telephones were on posts on the boardwalks, one per block. She remembers being sick and watching her mother walk to the phone to call the doctor.
And we didn't get a phone until we moved up on Outer Drive. And that was another interesting story. Everybody was on a party line.
Mm.
And we happened to be on a party line with a friend of mine. So we would, at school, would make arrangements with another friend to call one of us at a certain time. And so we'd have a 3-way conversation.
Oh, wow.
She was a Girl Scout and registered only by her first name because records could not show last names of people working in the secret city. To this day, if you look up her record in the Knoxville Girl Scout office, she is listed simply as Patricia. Pat is the tall Girl Scout toward the back in the famous photo that became the cover of the book City Behind the Fence. Pat went to Highland View Elementary School until her parents eventually moved to an A house on Outer Drive. Outer Drive was a paved street, and the house had more space. Pat then transferred to Cedar Hill Elementary. I tease Pat that she went to school at what is now the Children's Museum and a park. What a fun girl. That house on Outer Drive remained the family home to the day her mother died just a few years ago. Pat remembers the day the war ended.
Then when the war ended, my daddy had a 42 Chevrolet. And when the war ended, we gathered all of the people that we could gather in to get into that little Chevrolet. And we went around town blowing our car horns and yelling and screaming and hollering. And Daddy's horn got stuck. And so he pulled over to the side of the road and to fix it. And this man came by and he yelled at my daddy and he said, "Let her blow, buddy, let her blow."
Pat remembers when the gates opened in 1949. Pat said that it was an honor to be given a badge to wear in the secret city at the age of 12. She was 10 when the gates opened and very disappointed never to have received a badge.
What's the most important thing do you think you were taught about life by growing up in Oak Ridge?
That's a hard question. There was a lot of freedom for children here. It was safe. You could not live in Oak Ridge unless you had a job. So crime was very, very low. And children could go anywhere. And, you know, I rode my bicycle all the time when I got older. I could go anywhere on my bicycle. I ran a lot of places. I love to run. And so I was very free.
Pat met her husband, Neil Smith, who moved to the secret city at the age of 9 in 1943 when his father, Ramsey Levi Smith, started work at Y12. Pat and Neil have been married for 65 years and have been very active members of the community their entire lives. Neil retired from Oak Ridge National Lab. The two of them have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren.